Hello friends, welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we will understand a very important grammar topic, clauses. In the next few minutes, in 3 steps, you will understand clauses clearly and find it very easy. See the complete video क्योंकि मैं आपको 3 बहुत ही यूजफुल ट्रिक्स बताऊंगा। हाँ, लेकिन शुरू करने से पहले इफ यू वांट टू क्लियर योर कंसेप्ट ऑफ सब्जेक्ट, that is subject and predicate, you can see my video on subject and predicate. I have put the link in the description box. So let's start. Step 1. What is a clause? A clause is a group of words that contains subject and verb. That means to form a clause, two conditions need to be satisfied. One, it should be a group of words. And second, the group of words should contain subject and verb. एक क्लॉज फॉर्म होने के लिए 2 कंडीशंस सेटिस्फाइड होना बहुत ही जरूरी है। पहला, इट शुड बी अ ग्रुप ऑफ वर्ड्स। दूसरा, वो ग्रुप ऑफ वर्ड्स जो हैं उनमें सब्जेक्ट एंड वर्ब होना जरूरी है। लेट्स अंडरस्टैंड दिस विद द हेल्प ऑफ सम एग्जांपल्स। Let's do a few examples. He thinks that he will win. He thinks is a group of 2 words. It contains the subject he and the verb thinks. So he thinks is a clause. Rest of the sentence, that he will win, is again a clause. Why? Because it is a group of words and it contains the subject he and the verb will win. So this is also a clause. Second sentence, I know where he studied. I know is a clause because it is a group of 2 words. The subject is I and the verb is know. Where he studied is also a clause because it's a group of 3 words. The subject is he and the verb is studied. They can stay where they are. They can stay is a clause because it's a group of 3 words. The subject is they and the verb here is can stay. The rest of the sentence, where they are, is also a clause because it is a group of 3 words with the subject they and the verb are. Nobody knows where he lives. Nobody knows is the clause because here the subject is nobody and the verb is knows. Where he lives again is a clause because here the subject is he and the verb is lives. You tell me when you will come. You tell me is a clause because here the subject is you and the verb is tell. Similarly, when you will come, here this is also a clause with the subject you and the verb will come. Now we come to the second step, types of clauses. Clauses are of 2 types. First, independent clause and second, dependent clause. Independent clause makes sense on its own. यानी इंडिपेंडेंट क्लॉज अपने आप में कंप्लीट होता है और इंफॉर्मेशन की जरूरत नहीं होती. सेकेंड टाइप इज डिपेंडेंट क्लॉज. डिपेंडेंट क्लॉज डज नॉट मेक सेंस ऑन इट्स ओन, यानी डिपेंडेंट क्लॉज इनकम्प्लीट होता है. लेट्स अंडरस्टैंड दिस विद द हेल्प ऑफ एग्जांपल्स. We will work on the same previous examples. We have already found out the clauses. Now we'll find out which of those are independent and dependent clause. He thinks. Does it make sense on its own? Yes. Well, suppose if we ignore the remaining part of the sentence and if we consider only he thinks, it makes sense on its own. He thinks, वो सोचता है. Yes, therefore this clause is an independent clause. But look at this remaining part. That he will win. Does it make sense on its own? No, it does not make sense on its own, and therefore that he will win is dependent clause. Similarly, I know. I know is independent clause because it makes complete sense on its own. But where he studied, just consider these three words, where he studied. Does it make sense on its own? No, it does not. So therefore, where he studied is dependent clause. They can stay. They can stay. वो रह सकते हैं. Yes, it makes complete sense on its own. वो अपने आप में complete है और इसीलिए इसे independent clause कहते हैं. Where they are, does it make sense on its own? No, and therefore this where they are is dependent clause. Nobody knows where he lives. Nobody knows. Only consider nobody knows. कोई नहीं जानता. Does it make sense on its own? Yes. Therefore, this is an independent clause. Where he lives. वो कहाँ रहता है? It does not make sense on its own. वो अपने आप में complete नहीं है, पूरी information नहीं है और इसीलिए this is dependent clause. You tell me. आप बताओ मुझे. Makes sense, isn't it? Does not require any more information. So therefore, you tell me is independent clause. Remaining part, when you will come. When you will come. Just consider these four words. When you will come. Does it make sense on its own? No, it does not. And therefore, this part is the dependent clause. Now we come to the third step. Types of dependent clauses. Well, there are three types of dependent clauses. Dependent clauses तीन टाइप के होते हैं. First, noun clause. Second, adjective clause. And third, adverb clause. Noun clause does the work of a noun. Noun clause noun का काम करता है. Adjective clause does the work of an adjective. And adverb clause does the work of an adverb. Adverb clause एक adverb का काम करता है sentence में. कुछ sentences try करते हैं. I believe that he is honest. Well, I believe is a clause and it makes complete sense on its own. So therefore, I believe is independent clause. Remaining part, that he is honest. This clause does not make sense on its own. So therefore, this is a dependent clause. But what type of a dependent clause is this? Ask the question what to the independent clause. If the dependent clause is the answer, then the dependent clause is a noun clause. Let's apply this trick. I believe. Believe what? That he is honest. See, when you ask the question what to the verb of the independent clause, your dependent clause is the answer. So therefore, the dependent clause is noun clause. She hopes that she will pass. She hopes is a clause which makes complete sense on its own. So therefore, it is an independent clause. Remaining part of the sentence obviously is dependent clause. She hopes. Hopes what? Ask the question what to the verb in the independent clause. Hopes what? That she will pass. Yes, you're getting the answer. So therefore, the dependent clause is a noun clause. Nobody knows where he lives. Nobody knows is a clause which makes complete sense on its own. So therefore, it is an independent clause. Knows what? Where he lives. Yes, when you ask the question what to the verb in the independent clause, your dependent clause is the answer. So the dependent clause is a noun clause. I wonder if he is correct. I wonder. Two words, but they make complete sense on its own, and therefore this clause is an independent clause. Remaining part is a dependent clause. I wonder. Wonder what? If he is correct, yes, I'm getting the answer, and therefore the dependent clause is a noun clause. Now let's try the fifth sentence. Show me the way that goes to the school. Show me the way is a clause and it makes complete sense on its own. So therefore it is an independent clause. Show what? That goes to the school. Is the dependent clause the answer? No, the dependent clause is not the answer. Then, well, here comes the second trick. Ask the question which to the noun of the independent clause. And if your dependent clause is the answer, then the dependent clause is an adjective clause. Well, let's apply this trick. Show me the way. Which way? The way that goes to the school or that goes to the school? Yes, your dependent clause is the answer. So your dependent clause is adjective clause. Ria lost the book which you had given. Ria lost the book is the clause which makes complete sense on its own, and so it is an independent clause. Which book? Ria lost the book. Which book? Which you had given. Yes, your dependent clause is the answer. So the dependent clause is adjective clause. They found the pen that was lost. They found the pen is the independent clause here. Which pen? That was lost. Yes, your dependent clause is the answer. So your dependent clause is the adjective clause. The girl who is kind greeted me. Look at this sentence carefully. The girl greeted me is the main clause because this together makes sense on its own. The girl greeted me is the independent clause. Which girl greeted or which girl who is kind? Your dependent clause is the answer, and therefore the dependent clause is the adjective clause. The student who works hard will pass. The student will pass. This clause makes sense on its own, and therefore it is an independent clause. Which student? Who works hard, and therefore this is the dependent clause, and the dependent clause is an adjective clause. Next, they can stay where they are. They can stay is the independent clause. They can stay. Stay what? Where they are? No, I am not getting the dependent clause as the answer. They can stay. There is no noun over here in the independent clause at all. So, friends, if the dependent clause is neither the noun clause or the adjective clause, then obviously the dependent clause is of the third type, that is the adverb clause. You ask the question, what? You did not get the dependent clause as the answer. You ask the question, which? You did not get the dependent clause as the answer. So obviously, you are left out with the adverb clause. So the dependent clause over here is adverb clause. Come on, let's try this out. He came after night fell. He came. He came what? After night fell? No, you're not getting the answer. He came. There is no noun over here. So therefore, obviously, he came is the independent clause. First of all, let's write that. And after night fell is neither noun nor the adjective clause. It's an adverb clause. Let's take up the last sentence. I did the work because I wanted to. I did the work here is independent clause. I did the work. What? Because I wanted to. No. I did the work. Which work? Because I wanted to. No. When you ask the question what and which, you are not getting the dependent clause as the answer. So obviously the dependent clause is adverb clause. So friends, today we have studied what is a clause, the two types of clauses, that is independent clause and dependent clause. Next we studied the three types of dependent clauses, that is noun clause, adjective clause and adverb clause. Friends, if you like the video or learned something from it, please click on the like button. Share the link and subscribe my channel if you haven't yet. We will meet soon in the next video. Till then, keep smiling. Bye.